The Bristol Board of Education. Maintaining a safe and secure learning environment for all students.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the December 5th, 2018 Board of Education meeting. We're pleased you're all here to join us. I did want to announce that the seat next to me is vacant. Our superintendent is in Hartford with our Teacher of the Year candidate going through performance there. So she'll be joining us later in the meeting. But Dr. Cabron will fill in her stead and provide any reports that the superintendent would have reported. But we are going to have the anthem played first, and then we're going to have the pledge. So after the anthem, if you would remain standing, we will do the pledge. We are led by the anthem this evening by the choir from Eastern, directed by Michael Cordier.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, students, and Mr. Cordier for joining us. I elevated you. We'll now do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time we'd like to take a moment of silence for some of our former faculty who have passed on. First is Keith Simpson, who was a principal at Bingham, Westwoods, Northeast, Stafford, and Jennings from 1963 through 1997. And Emily Talion, who was a teacher at O'Connell from 1955 to 1960 and from 1970 to 1992. And we'd also add to that moment of silence, today the day of mourning for our 41st president, George Herbert Walker Bush, and we would ask to add him and his family to your thoughts. Thank you. Our first item of business is the staff recognition, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Carbone.
Thank you and good evening. There are two recognitions this evening. One is a recognition for their participation in the Literacy Collaborative, and one is for participation by one of our art teachers. So first, I'd like to introduce Mr. Lewandowski, our teacher at Southside School, and Mrs. Fortin has graciously offered to be Mr. Lewandowski's muse for the evening. We will say muse. Mr. Lewandowski presented this, an invention that he created and shared at the Connecticut Art Educators Association conference, and he is going to wow us this evening with his creation.
All right, talk about starting off with a bang. People ask me what I do. I don't tell them I'm an art teacher. I tell them I'm a teacher of creative problem solvers. And this came out of solving a problem inspired by my students. I've yet to come across a class that doesn't love to splatter paint. Any way, any form, any shape, watercolors, tempera, it doesn't matter. Can we throw paint? And yes, it's fun, but it's a mess. And I've tried it several different ways. I've consulted with lots of people. There's no way to do it without making a mess. So my challenge was to, how can I incorporate Jackson Pollock into my curriculum without having to have a disaster to clean up or to go outside and wear smocks. So I came up with this inspired by, I guess, hospital hazmat things where you can't touch the poisonous toxic stuff, so you're isolated from it in a booth. It had to be portable, it had to be lightweight. This board helped me set it up. It's less than 10 pounds, it's under $50. This is prototype number 2. There's more plans on the drawing board. I am exploring a patent on it, and I'm looking for some sharks. So if anyone has some invested capital, see me after. So what it is a self-contained splatter paint booth. I did present it at the conference. Everyone who came to my workshop wants one. They've been emailing me, texting me, calling me, looking for plans, dimensions, materials. And basically it's self-contained. All the paint stays inside. We have to tear it apart and reassemble it because the doors are too small here to get it through. But basically what you're going to do is, I've got sleeves built into it. I have gloves if you need to wear gloves. But you can literally do this and throw paint and go as wild as you want without paint going anywhere other than inside the plastic. So we have paint cups. I have a canvas set up. There's several brushes, and Jackson Pollock was a dripper and a thrower and a sprayer. So basically what you would do is, your hands in the sleeves to protect your clothing, pick up a brush, choose a color, and start throwing. And the paint stays here, goes on the canvas, and you come out spotless. No clean up.
No pressure. No pressure, I know.
So what I do is, I don't judge. What I do is I have 2 of these. I would set them up at the back of the room. I give the students 5 minutes. They put their name on their canvas. They put it in. We put paint in. They go paint, and then they go do something else. So in the course of 2 weeks, I can probably cover an entire class. And they, like I said, who doesn't like to splatter paint? So by sharing this at my conference with colleagues, we've come up with all kinds of associated plans. Like this could be done with clay and slip. You could put a bisque-fired bowl in there and throw glaze all over it and do a Jackson Pollock bowl. I see uses for this not only in the classroom but for 5th grade end of the year parties. I've done 2 Bristol Eastern graduation night parties. I can just see this being set up as an activity for them. My daughter works for the Pines Nursing Care Center in the summer as a recreation assistant. I can see this being therapeutic for elderly people, rehabilitative people, just to sit there and throw some paint around and get a canvas that they can paint up. So you would do that, create your canvas. There's a flap in the back. You take it out, you refill paint.
Let's see what you did.
And it comes right out, and of course you can take it home. So I've coordinated the 12 by 12 canvas with a 12 by 12 pizza box, which fits perfectly in. And you can take that home. And if it's okay with the board.
My hands are clean.
I don't want to interrupt the rest of the meeting and tear this apart. If I could leave it here, I'll come back Friday and set up.
Did you leave more canvases so we can all
I
try
have it in
it?
the car, so afterwards I'll put it on the table, you can have some fun.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Lewandowski.
And on behalf of the Bristol Public Schools, we will invest in your salary and take a 50% cut for any of the monies that come in. I figured. I would like to invite Erica Coleman, Kim Fusco, who is going to honor some of our newly trained Leslie Collaborative coaches.
Literacy coach graduates. And I just want to say, well, I think great teachers stress relief at the end of the day.
I knew that, I know Aaron's going to go back to South City. We need a paint party.
Good evening, everyone, Board of Ed Commissioner and Board of Ed members. My name is Kimberly DeFusco, and I'm a literacy coach at Southside School and also the district trainer for Bristol Public Schools for the Literacy Collaborative. The Literacy Collaborative is a research-based school improvement model grounded in consistent practices and principles implemented by educators working together to support not only student achievement, but also foster staff growth across the district. As some of you know, Bristol Public Schools has had a long-standing relationship with Lesley University in Boston, Mass. in order to provide a coherent approach to literacy instruction and to cultivate the talents of our teaching staff. The 2 classroom teachers and the literacy coach being honored here tonight have completed 6 graduate credit hours of inquiry-based learning in the areas of reading, writing, and instructional coaching. They've completed an extensive case study on several students. They've conducted many peer observations and coaching sessions using Southside, Green Hills, and Edgewood schools as lab sites, and they've met with their grade level colleagues to foster literacy growth. It is with great pride and pleasure that we present Marie Hurd, literacy coach at Edgewood School. Erin, we'll do it one at a time. So I'll let you do that. Okay, and there is a pin. When we're at Lesley University, we always get pinned by Irene Fontes, so we'll let you do the pinning. Congratulations. Also, Erin, where did Erin go? Oh, Erin Sexton, kindergarten teacher at Southside. Dave, no, you don't. And I just have to say, Erin has come full circle. She is also a product of Southside School and a former student of mine in the 4th grade. So we've really come full circle. And unfortunately, Judy Nazar, our 3rd participant, 2nd grade teacher at Green Hills School, she could not be here tonight. But please congratulate the 1st Bristol Public Schools training cohort of graduates in the Literacy Collaborative training. And thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about the Literacy Collaborative.
We thank you for your work, and congratulations to our new members.
All right. next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. You received them when you received your packets on Friday. Is there any changes or corrections to the minutes? If not, then we're ready to vote. All in favor, say, we need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion has been properly made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
One abstain.
Abstentions, thank you. Committee reports. I believe the only committee report we have is finance.
Yes, sir.
And so Commissioner River.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. We did meet on November 19th, discussed, we got a narrative from Mrs. Brown. We talked about some transfers, special education task force update, cafeteria report, just a couple of highlights. We may end up with a small issue in transportation, and though we are doing well in special services so far, that may change. That probably will change, and we're doing very well in food services. I am going to ask Mrs. Brown and Dr. Dieter to give us a little bit more detail.
Hello everyone, good evening. As Commissioner Rivers said, at the close of October, which is where this report is drawn from, the close of October, our financial expenditures did remain steady for most of our departments, and we were moving through the school year as expected. In the instruction character line, most of the amounts that show as available in our report will be expended prior to year end. Those include budgeted amounts for stipend payouts, substitutes, intern salaries, professional services, and general supplies. Those items are not encumbered like our salaries are. In the teacher salary line, you will see approximately $1 million due to several retirements. We had a couple of positions that we did not fill due to attrition, and we are being very guarded with those funds. Anything that does come up in the area, any unforeseen expenditures, the area of special education primarily, those funds will be available for transfer. In transportation, we did have an additional run added, so we do have an overage right now, which is roughly $62,000 at the end of October. That has increased throughout the month of November, so we are keeping a sharp eye on that. Operations and maintenance are fine. Benefits, on the city side, they have withdrawn the Board of Education's benefit amounts now, so this is the last month where you'll see a large number showing as available. So just warning you so that you don't have sticker shock next month. It's not going to show as having $16 million available in that line, but we are right on track there. For athletics, there are monies that show available, but again, our coaching stipends are paid out by season. So we still have about a little over $500,000 for coaching stipends yet to be paid, and also co-curricular stipends as showing there. So again, don't be fooled by that number that shows as available. Technology is doing great. Most of our funds have been encumbered for leases, and we are working with the city through partnered services and talking about the lease of Chromebooks to get our schools on rotation, so that as our Chromebooks reach end of life and we move into the future, we are all set for testing needs, and our technology is up to date. In the area of special education, as we ended Q1, we looked relatively good. However, we have seen some significant movement in the area of special education. We are eyeing our in-town transportation. Much of those expenditures are due to homeless population. Some of that will be offset by grants, but all of it will not. And also in our private tuition line, we have seen that line start to go over budget. We've seen more movement into the month of November. So again, that's something that we're keeping a sharp eye. Some of that will be offset by monies that were for state-placed students. We have fewer state-placed students, so we can offset our private tuition there. But again, it doesn't look like it's going to fully offset that. Not much to talk about in the issue of transfers. The committee did approve transfer for $35,000 in the technology area. That went from rents and leases where we had savings to software licensing that we put into effect for this year. And the cafeteria is looking very good. Although our costs are higher because we are serving far more meals due to our community eligibility provision, our revenue is higher. Revenue from federal and state is higher. Our cash sales are down. But this time last year, we were in the hole almost $165,000. This time this year, we are to the good $128,000. So that is good news with the regarding the cafeteria. We did start our 19-20 budget development season. We have met just this week with all of our elementary schools. One of the K through 8s, the second one we'll see tomorrow morning. The middle schools and the high schools we see tomorrow morning. And then we'll finish up our meetings next week with all of our district level departments. So my office is hard at work putting together that big puzzle, which is the 19-20 school year. And also, we discussed a security grant that a team of us here has put together. It's the 4th round of a competitive school security grant that we just put into the state of Connecticut. It was due on the 4th. We put it in on Monday the 3rd. I worked with our director of security, director of facilities, and each school administration to put those requests together. So hopefully we'll have some news about that in the month of January. And that is my report this evening. If you have questions.
Anybody have any questions? Jill, I was curious, those items that you said we have not encumbered, like coaches' stipends for one, is there any way for us to encumber those so we have a better snapshot of where we are, or does the system not allow that easily?
I can certainly look into that. I don't see why the system wouldn't allow it. It's not something that we've traditionally done. As you know, we just started encumbering salaries shortly after my arrival here last year. I don't see why we can't do that. Worst case scenario, if there was some coaching position or a team that didn't have as many coaches as needed, and then we had to make adjustments, it's perfectly fine. So I don't see why we can't do that.
Yep. Okay.
All right,
Dr. Deere.
Good evening, Chairman Wilson and Commissioners. Special ed report, our enrollment continues to trend higher than state average with respect to new students enrolling in district that are already identified. So that's been problematic. We have seen a cumulative effect of that both in our in-district programs as well as students requiring programs and placement out of district. Meeting regularly with Mrs. Brown and her staff, and we're paying very close attention to those students and the expenses associated with those students in particular. We are also looking very closely at our transportation costs. As Mrs. Brown indicated, in-town transportation is trending. We feel that that's due to the number of students that are seeking support under McKinney-Vento, which is federal legislation that mandates that we provide educational stability through transportation and continued placement. So we'll continue to look at ways that we can combine bus runs and look for cost avoidance or cost savings there. Commissioner Vibert identified that I attended the statewide task force on special education costs. So that was sponsored by it's sponsored by the RESCs, which are the Regional Education Service Centers. And I mention that because this is a statewide issue and there are many people that are looking for solutions to this problem of special ed funding. So it was the first of several workshops that I'll continue to attend and provide input to. It was well attended by superintendents, directors of special services, and business managers, and as that develops, I'll continue to update both the Finance Committee and the board on any activity there. And in addition, I've been reaching out to directors in the region and other central office leaders in the region to identify what their trends are and to see what, if any, remedy they've sought. So with respect to tuition and transportation, those seem to be the two issues that are trending in a direction that's potentially problematic for us. Take any questions if you have. Thank you.
Dr. Dieter.
Okay, we will now move to the chairman's report. I'm proud to say that when we attended the CAVE convention a couple weeks ago, Bristol was one of the districts that had probably the most attendees there in terms of the board. We had 7 of our 9 commissioners there, as well as 2 of our administrators, Dr. Carbone and Dr. Moreau, and 2 of our student representatives that are sitting here this evening attended some student sessions. So I think it bodes well for our community that those that are charged with making decisions about public education were there, trying to be informed and learn as much as they could about their work. I asked the commissioners if they would to share some of the highlights of their experiences. They were obviously there for 20 hours over the weekend, or part of 20 or 16 hours, I guess. And so they can't capsulize it in 3 minutes, but I asked them to. So I'd ask each of them to share what they can. I'll start with my left. Joe, I know you were unable to make it, so we'll start with Kristen.
One of the sessions that I chose to attend, was safety and security. That had to do with that. And while we were there, there was quite a bit of discussion on the more on a legislative and legal perspective as far as camera footage and things like that. But what was interesting was that there was the superintendent of the Newtown public school system, and there was the superintendent of the Trumbull school system, and they shared some of their security, physical security improvements with their schools. There was also some discussion about particular security products and what they had implemented and how they're used, kiosk model, and some of that double-door safety models in the physical parts of the building, which was very interesting. I know that we've had some of those challenges in some of our own buildings, and I found it to be very interesting to hear the perspectives of what's been implemented in some other of our neighboring districts, especially considering our hopefulness on the grant money that might be coming forward. I had that in the back of my mind when I chose that particular session.
Before Commissioner Dubey speaks, she was at the convention. I know she's not shown in the photo, but there was a very limited time to take the photo with the commissioner, and so Commissioner Dubey got down there at 10 late and missed the opportunity to get into the big photo. But
Right.
please share.
Put my head out.
Yeah, we should put you in.
Okay, so one of the courses that I went to was called On Social Media, Cyberbullying, Sexting, and Regulating Communication in the Digital Age. It was presented by an attorney by the name of Michael McKeon, and I chose that one because I am a parent of 2 middle school and high school children, so this is very current in my life. Some of the things that I learned were very upsetting as a parent. They dealt a lot with sexting, and he was very mindful to let us know that both parties in a sexting case can be criminally liable, whether you're a minor or not. Educators are mandated reporters if they are to come across any sexting, and he did remind that mandated reporting means within 12 hours via a phone call, and a written report to DCF within 48 hours. A couple other things that were interesting to note was disciplining students for off-campus conduct, so cyberbullying as one of the main culprits, can occur if the conduct would foreseeably create a risk of substantial disruption within the school environment. And they also did have a little caveat on educators and how they need to be careful with their own internet presence, because there have been cases where educators have lost their jobs based on things that have come up on the digital area. So it was very informative. I was very glad that I had the opportunity to go.
Thank you. Commissioner Caggiano?
So I had the opportunity, I made the picture but then had to leave on Saturday, so that worked out well. But I did attend all day on Friday, and the one program that I will choose to talk about, to keep it at 3 minutes, is Unlearning Bias and Building Community. I chose this specifically because, as you all are aware, we are working on a community discussion on inclusion. And the group that put this on was National Conference of Community and Justice. And there were a lot of really good things that we discussed there about implicit bias, about the fact that diversity, being the presence of differences, is just the first step. But inclusion is accepting and respecting and valuing that diversity, and it does require intention. I will share with you that this is kind of on the negative side, but I think it'll turn very positive in a second, that they probably did not create the safest environment. Again, I was not as comfortable with this discussion. I think it definitely, my bias was that this was not as well done as I do believe that our January 3rd community discussion will be. We have a different vendor helping us with that, and that's just a quick reminder to let us know that January 3rd we'll have that community discussion. So.
I presume you put that in your evaluation, because I happen to be the chairman of that committee, the convention committee, and we do look at those evaluations closely, so I hope you gave us that feedback.
I have not yet, but I will. Thank you for the reminder.
The Commissioner.
Thank you. One of the breakout sessions that I attended was legislative issues. So I'll just give you an update on some of the things that are happening with task forces and working groups. One of them is actually very near and dear to our hearts. The Special Education Cost Model Task Force and Feasibility Study. It is to conduct a feasibility study on alternative methods of funding special education and addressing the factors impacting the increasing cost and predictability of special education services. They are examining a state special education predictable cost cooperative model or other alternative model and other models used in other states. They did talk about one state, and Commissioner Caggiano was there as well. I think it was Wisconsin.
It was Wisconsin.
Where the special services budget is handled at the state level. We've been talking about that for a long time, and I don't know how feasible it is, but it is being talked about, it is being looked at to see if we could do that.
And fully funded, I'll add.
And fully funded, yes, to aggregate the special services costs at the state level and compensate for local level volatility. As you know, or you may know, our special services is roughly 19% of our budget, and the state average is around 13-14%. Urban districts tend to have a higher percentage, but I believe we are higher than most of the urban districts. I think.
No, we're right on target with.
Okay, I thought you would talk to me.
I talked to Waterbury and East Hartford the other day, and we're both in the same range.
Okay, so that was one that I wanted to talk about. There is also the Classroom Safety Working Group. You may know, you may remember that Public Act 1889 last year did not make it through. It was vetoed, and that is being revised in a working group to talk about again and see if they can come up with some issues to get that passed. There was a social and emotional learning task force. There was also a speaker that morning. I won't say much about that in case somebody else is going to. Best practices for the promotion of social emotional learning in schools. And I think that was all I was going to talk about that particular session. I'd like to go to the legislative sessions.
Since we're looking at it, Mr. Grabowski, he wasn't there, but I'm thinking about him. One of the other task forces that's out there that is pretty interesting is Task Force on Fingerprinting. And the state was audited by the FBI and said that we weren't doing our fingerprinting correctly because we were doing it like in a shared service but with a risk. And they would share those results to all the school districts a substitute or a teacher might teach at. And they said that was a violation of their laws or their practices. And so now a substitute teacher, if they're going to be in 4 different districts, would have to pay the $75 each time to be fingerprinted at each school district. The same with our substitutes, they would have to. So it's a problem that we're trying to work with the state police and the FBI to resolve, but it does not look like a good resolution of this matter from the people that I speak to. And it's just kind of one of those interesting things where we're all trying to talk about shared services and, saving money, but then, there's barriers to doing that. And the FBI has said that we must, each of the student teachers or teachers, if they're teaching in multiple districts, have to get separate fingerprinting from each district. So.
They talked about that in this session as well, and I think they mentioned that it was a 30-day, the fingerprints were only kept on file for 30 days.
Yeah, which could
cost people a lot of money.
And there's a 4-month backlog for.
Yeah, that's the other
well.
problem. Commissioner Taylor.
So the workshop I'll talk about is called Responding Effectively to Hate and Bias Incidents. It was run by the Anti-Defamation League. And the first thing that stood out to me was that the presenter had said, the measure of your district is not that these incidents happen, but rather how you respond to these incidents. You can't always control they're going to happen, but it's up to us how we respond to them. They talked about the difference between a hate crime and a bias crime, or actually not a crime, but a hate crime and a bias, and when it's criminal and the different characteristics that make up each description, you would call it. They also talked about some 3 key points when something does happen, and the first one that I know I appreciated was to directly denounce the act, to not downplay it, to not try. Sometimes with FERPA and everything else, they were saying how we're so careful that sometimes we don't give enough information, and it makes the community feel a little bit left out and a little bit on edge. And if if it's racism, to say it's racism. If it was a homophobic incident, go ahead and say what the incident was. You can't say who the person is, but that we need to denounce it for what it is and stop trying to kind of downplay these incidents. It also said, or they also said, sorry, to support the targeted students, and not just the actual student it happened to, but there are other students that are going to be affected by any incident like this. So whether it's their friends, whether it's somebody who relates to their group, that we really need to look out for everybody, not just the actual student that the crime or the bias incident happened to. And the third point was to seek justice and avoid blame. We have to remember that these are students, that they are still people making mistakes, and it's our job to educate them. We're not going to make excuses for them, but we need to educate them why it's wrong, how it's wrong, that is even wrong. Sometimes people really are not aware of what's wrong and right. So we should be focusing on education, of course, some punishment, but that should not be the focus. Also, restorative justice practices and the intent versus the impact. Just because somebody did not intend something does not mean that they did not impact somebody in a certain way. So I thought that was very informative.
Do you have in your notes sharing a little bit about the Middletown experience?
I did actually, a little bit.
I thought maybe...
Not as much as I thought I would, though.
Okay.
You may have heard of Middletown, where, was it right around Martin Luther King's birthday? Was it last year or the year before?
Last year.
And there was a student who was running around with a Confederate flag and yelling out racial slurs around, I think it was one of the VOTEC schools. So the Middletown superintendent was there, and he talked about how they brought student voice in. And that actually helped, because the students were the one who said, this isn't our town, this doesn't happen here. In fact, the quote is, we don't do this around here. And that really lifted up the community to stand behind the students. It was interesting, all he said is, that student's not here anymore. What happened, obviously we don't know, but he's not at that school anymore. So it sounded like their community really got behind the school district in really making sure these incidents were not part of Middletown's culture.
Just out of curiosity, that superintendent, I believe, had been a superintendent about 30 days when that incident occurred. So, it just shows sometimes these situations pop up and you don't have much time to think about them or plan for them. Commissioner Hintz.
Mrs. Vibbert alluded to the social-emotional speaker we had, who was the keynote speaker on Friday morning, Mark Brackett from the Yale Center for Social and Emotional Learning. He did, I thought, a tremendous job, and I think most of the board was there. And this work touches on so many of the things that everybody talked about in their sessions. Social emotional learning is taking children, the minute they get to school, helping them identify their emotions, learn constructive ways to deal with their emotions. We talk about restorative justice, we talk about bias and hate crimes, we talk about security in the schools. If the children don't have the capacity to monitor and control their own behavior, if children don't have a way to identify how they're feeling, they don't have the language or the framework to be able to engage in restorative justice. So much of this work we're doing in the district right now, I think desperately needs social and emotional learning at its heart. I enjoyed the keynote speaker so much, I went to the individual session that Mark Brackett and Sean Levy from the Yale Center for Social and Emotional Learning gave, and they talked about social and emotional learning being applicable at the board level and the administrator level and the teacher level as well. And I think there are lessons that we as a board, we as a district can engage in that would really improve our communication, that would improve our behavior, our ability to get along, our ability to deal with conflict. So that and just missing Mr. O'Brien terribly. Those are my two takeaways.
Yes. Just on Dr. Brackett, I know he's working with the leadership at CABE to try to get involved in some of the local school districts and see how we can collaborate with some of his work in his clinic.
That's great stuff.
The session I went to was one, and the only reason I went to it, I must admit, is, as the chairman of the convention committee, they asked me to moderate a session, and no one else wanted to moderate this session, so I kind of got the short straw. And it was one that was only about 10 board members and superintendents in the audience, but the presenters, it's called the REL, Regional Education Laboratory, and it's funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and it provides, I don't know, those of you that went to college, if you ever had to do a research topic and then you'd go to the research librarian and they would tell you everything you needed to know, where the sources were for whatever topic you were going to write on or research. Well, that's a little bit about what this organization does for education. It's a research laboratory. It's applied research, the real practical problems that education is confronted with, and what are some of the research on that, not just in your state, but other nearby states or the country. And some of the examples of some of the problems, and the reason I use the analogy of a research librarian, you can bring this problem to this organization. It's a free service, and they will provide you an answer in 30 to 60 days, depending on how much work they have to do to get the research done. But some of the examples are, what does research say about the characteristics of a successful alternative education program in public education? What research is available on best practices related to increasing graduation rates and decreasing dropout rates for English language learners? What does research say about the effectiveness of resource officers? And then another example I use is, what does research say about the academic value of work for homework for children at the elementary level? So you can see that gives you a flavor of the real practical problems that they research and solve, and it helps inform boards and administration. It's a free service. All the administration of the board have to do is pose the question, and then they will do the research for you. So it was more interesting than I thought, and I think we'll probably have to give them more exposure in the future for their service. So that concludes our CABE conference wrap-up, and Mr. O'Brien is probably saying thankfully. The next topic that I wanted to speak about was the Memorial Boulevard School Committee. We had a committee meeting. Dr. Dieter, who was the chair of the committee, and Cheryl is in the audience someplace. There she is. And we had a meeting last Thursday, and we talked about a number of issues, but the big issue was that we picked 4 highly qualified, what I call constructors. They have a fancy name, but it's the people that are going to construct the schools. And so now that we've identified 4 out of all the submissions that we received, those 4 highly qualified constructors will be brought in for interviews, and then the committee will select someone to build the schools. One of the other things that we did was we set up, everybody received submissions for commissioning agents. What a commissioning agent does is a third-party contractor separate from the constructor of the building, who really starts from the beginning of the project all the way to the end, but they make sure that all the systems that you put in a building, whether it's heating, ventilation, air conditioning, security system, anything that's a system, anything that has to do with the building or the building envelope, they call it. It's a fancy word for the building and the campus of the building. Works the way you think it should. Have you met all your warranties? Are you meeting all the conditions of the warranty that you are supposed to as the owner of the building? And the systems themselves, are they doing everything they were promised to do? And so that commissioning agent does that. And so we've got the submissions for those. Now we will do the same process. We will identify 4 that are highly qualified, and then we'll bring in those 4 highly qualified for interviews, and we will select them over the next month or so. And then I think my final note, and then if any of the others want to add to it, is that we picked a spokesman for the committee. Knowing that there may be times when the press wants to talk to someone about what's going on with the committee, and so we have decided that Dr. Dieter will be our spokesman for the committee, so the committee members themselves won't address any issues that as normal in committees like this, we pick a spokesman, and we're glad that Dr. Dieter is going to take that over on our behalf. So I don't know if Cheryl or Dr. Dieter want to add anything that I forgot. Okay. And then the final thing is really just a teaser for you, and it's on the Bristol Education Foundation. You all know that that's the foundation that primarily is responsible for the mini grants that we have, as well as some other support for Bristol Public Schools. And the committee will be coming to a reception before the meeting next month on January 2nd. I am not exactly sure what time, but it's well before the meeting, probably around 6 o'clock, I would think. I don't know if anybody knows. Pete, do you know?
I'm not sure.
You don't know either, but it'll be out to you in the notice, but it's either at 5:30 or 6. We will be meeting upstairs in the hallway, and what happens is all the winners of the Ed Foundation's grants, these innovative grants that we give to the teachers and administrators, they share a couple minutes about their grant, and so we hope that you'll attend. We hope someone from the public will attend if you're a past award winner and you want to attend. If you were a board member or supporter of the Bristol Education Foundation, we hope you'd attend. These are really exciting, and we can't spend enough time on them in the board meeting here, but we do want to give them the recognition. The teachers that come up, these are resources that we give these teachers, as small amounts of money really, to give them that sort of spurs a little bit of innovation and entrepreneurship in our schools, and we're really pleased as the Education Foundation to be able to provide that. I think we're providing almost $15,000 to all the award winners this year, and so I really do hope you're able to attend before the meeting next month on January 2nd. And that concludes my remarks, and we will move down to the consent agenda. We want to welcome Dr. Moreau back from the Teacher of the Year Award ceremony, and thank you for joining us.
I'm very proud to welcome our Teacher of the Year, Mike Reynolds, across the stage at the Bush Bowl. It's always a wonderful event.
Okay, thank you. And I almost forgot the student representatives. You would have been raising your flag at me. So at this point, it's the student representative. I'm not sure who's going to speak first. Okay, I guess it's Catherine who's going to speak first.
Good evening. Central has been very busy the last November with all the cool events we've had, like the pep rally and the Battle of the Bell. And December, we're still going to be very busy. This month, the PSAT scores will be released on December 10th and 11th. Any students who want to take the ACT can take the test on December 8th, February 9th, April 13th, June 8th, and July 13th for this school year. Yesterday, December 4th, the Leadership Council held a breakfast at Nucci's. There were students and teachers who were able to discuss giving back to Bristol through donations of old sports gear, and the donations will go to the Bristol Boys and Girls Club. NHS will also be participating in the annual holiday food drive for this month, so donations are greatly appreciated. The seniors at BC were able to attend a field trip organized by Ms. Dickow to see Neil deGrasse Tyson, a noted astrophysicist. The seniors went to the Bushnell Theater in Hartford to listen to him speak. The field trip was set to benefit the writing initiative at BC so that it can be appreciated and really gain momentum as a program. BC's Got Talent auditions will be held the 17th and 18th, so the show will be coming up soon. A fairly new event called the BC Coffee House is meeting again on December 12th. The event is organized by Ms. Farrell and is a platform for students to share poetry, music, and art. To round out the month, Festivus is coming up on December 21st, right before Christmas break. Also, I'd like to speak about the CADE convention that I went to on November 17th in Groton. I was able to learn a lot of information about my position as a student rep in the student session we had.
We discussed a lot about the student rep policies, and it was a real learning experience. Students from all over CT were able to talk about the Board of Education and the process of becoming student representatives. Lori and I also attended the Equity and Excellence Clinic along with Dr. Moreau. In the clinic, we were able to learn about the impact equity has in our schools and students. Dolores Canamo, the Partnership Director for the Equal Opportunity Schools Program, and Colleen Weiner, the Principal of Middletown High School, were the presenters, and we were able to see the impact of equity in the classroom. Dolores spoke about the importance of Asians, African Americans, and low-income housing students being exposed to AP IB level classes. These groups are generally lower in attendance in those classes, and as a result have lower chance of making it to college, or it's more difficult for them to get into college. Colleen spoke about the process Middletown High went through and had the graphs and data to show for it because she participated in the Equal Opportunity Schools program. The whole workshop was engaging and really informative. And another highlight of the convention was being able to hear the students on the student panel, who are both student reps of the school, and they addressed a range of questions about topics like mastery-based classes and Chromebooks that people in the audience had to ask. The convention was a positive learning experience, and it was great to be there. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dr. Marone, Dr. Caballon, Dr. Galloway, and commissioners. First, I want to thank you for giving me this chance to attend the CAP convention, where I enjoyed what I learned. Katie and I were very excited about this event that we arrived half an hour early. After breakfast that we were hosted by the staff member of the hotel, the convention started with the guest speaker, Mr. Freeman A. Habalski III. He has served as president of the University of Maryland. His research focused on science and math education with an emphasis on minority participation and performance. He is one of the most inspiring speakers I have seen because of the way he tells his story. It makes you feel that you can do something to improve the future of others. He described the educational barrier he faced through his career, which inspired him to improve the condition for other minorities. This resonated with me, and my dedicated teacher and are instrumental to help me achieve my career goals. After the speech, I went to the event that was specialized for students who serve as board liaisons from different districts of CT. I learned more about the uniqueness of each area. For example, every district had different ways of selecting the student to represent their school. Some viewed it academic involvement, while others viewed it social involvement. The most significant event that I attended was called Equity and Excellence. This event started off asking participants to select a top one quote that they feel connected to. I selected the quote, "Don't judge my talents by how I look or act." Some people will often make comments to me that are stereotype Asian, such as I must be good in math, not taking account how much work I have to do to achieve in particular subject. It also speaks to how often people make judgments on others based on their race. People are too quick to assume that intelligence is related to individuals' ethnicity. Next, we listen to another speaker, Ms. Dolores Camano, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, who shared her story. In summary, her teacher felt sympathy for her and didn't challenge her because they don't want to overwhelm her. However, one educator believed in her ability, and that changed her life. It's Bristol Eastern's mission that our teachers understand our individual stories and to help our students to be successful, just like Ms. Camano. Some highlight of event at Eastern. The community college fair was held on November 28th, and it had an amazing turnout. BE had a strong civic spirit. We wanted to give back to our community. The Avid sophomore class rolled out the Flash Food Drive program to help collect the food items for Brian's Angel, a local group dedicated to help homeless and needy people here in Bristol. It has been operating for a little over 3 years now and had become an essential safety net for those who live on the fringe of our community. Their program became even more crucial in September when a busy soup kitchen that gave our meal over the weekends ceased to exist. Brian's Angel have been picking up some of the overflow. As a result, they run out of staples almost every week. Our student goal is to make an announcement for a needed item each Monday, collect that item Tuesday through Thursday, and then deliver what we have collected on Friday afternoon. I'm thankful for those who run this event and those who contribute because it's essential for everybody in our community. Next, Mr. McDermott, who is one of our Spanish teachers at Eastern, has created a partnership with a school in Ecuador to enhance his students' writing, language, and communication skill. His Spanish classes are Skyping with the school in Ecuador and sending letters back and forth. December is an exciting month for students of Bristol Eastern Theater Art Program. They will be having a performance of A Christmas Carol on Friday, December 7th and Saturday, December 8th, with showing at 6 p.m. and one showing on the 8th at 12 p.m. as well. There will be a fair featuring vendors and even Santas. I hope you all can attend because our students have worked so hard on this production. Logan will be playing Bob Kurtach, the Tiny Tim's father. Lastly, to include Bristol Eastern will be having a Lancer game that will be taking place on December 21st. Different clubs and administration will be sponsoring. This will be a time where our school comes together and has fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to mention that these two young ladies have been participating in our Equity, Inclusion, and Excellence series, and they're going to be at our January 3rd meeting, and they've really provided very insightful positions as students, and they're really living it and feeling it. The rest of us think about it, but you guys really giving us a boots on the ground, if you will, experience, and your input has been invaluable. And we thank you for the commitment that not only you're doing as student rep, but also serving on this panel. It's very important, your contribution. Thank you. At this moment, I will introduce the superintendent, and she will give us her report. She caught her breath.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my PowerPoint up, and I'm going to ask Dr. Carbone to give some highlights of our second planning meeting for equity, inclusiveness, and excellence.
Thank you for the video.
Oh, it's right there? Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
As mentioned previously, this past Monday, we had our second planning session for our upcoming community conversation on equity, inclusiveness, and excellence. In total, we've had 22 planning committee members comprised of fellow Board of Education commissioners, community members, students, parents, and staff in our planning sessions, and they will serve as our co-facilitators during our January 3rd community conversation. We invite the public and the Bristol community at large to join us on January 3rd at 5:30 at the Bristol Eastern Cafeteria to continue our conversation.
And we really would appreciate as many board members to be present. I am going to post it as a workshop so that if there are 5 or more of you there, we have our quorum and we have it posted. Before I get into the main part of my report, I'd like to introduce Javier J.R. Rosario. He is our Safety and Security Director. He's gotten comfortable, huh?
Yeah.
Why don't you give a little something about what you showed me today that we need to work on?
Sure. Good morning, commissioners, board members. Javier Rosario. I've been on 3 months with the staff here. Quick background about myself: 29 years of law enforcement with East Hartford Police Department. I'd like to believe that I bring in a strong working knowledge of emergency management and planning. My last 5 years were spent with the command staff over there. I can tell you that East Hartford is very similar to Bristol as far as, geography, school district size, demographics, all that good stuff. So I come in here with the expectation that I was going to be able to hit the ground running, and I like to believe I've done that. I've thrown a lot at the staff, all the administrators at all the schools, the board here, Dr. Carbone, Dr. Moreau. I've thrown a lot at them. There's always room for improvement. Obviously, we're working on a lot of things. I know as soon as we got here, we've implemented a bunch of things. I think we got some. The big key was to standardize procedures from school to school, from leader to leader, so that whenever you guys are visiting any one specific school, you're going to see the same thing when it comes to management, crisis planning, procedural, all that good stuff. So So since I've come aboard, we've implemented school-specific crisis reference guides for each classroom, so that whenever they're doing a specific lockdown drill, secure school drill, they're all doing the same thing. A lot of it is based on best practices. I come from a network in the Capital District of a good network of all the school safety directors in the Capital District. So it's not about what I want to bring to the school district. It's always going to be about what the needs are in Bristol. It's never going to be about what I want. It's going to be in collaboration with Dr. Monroe, Dr. Carbone, all the administrators, and that's exactly what I bring. It's about what we feel we need. You mentioned the physical stuff when it comes to school. Mrs. Brown has been very helpful, and in fact, applying for this security grant is going to probably push Bristol further along in the process sooner than later. So that's a good thing. I know we have the right people in place to get a lot of stuff done. I'm passionate about school safety. I think next week is going to be a good reminder as we come up on 6 years of Sandy Hook next week. So in case you guys didn't have that at the front of your mind there, next week is the 6-year anniversary. So it's quite apropos that I'm here. I apologize that I didn't get to meet you all sooner. But I'm thankful that the board members here, the school staff, the administrators, just everybody in the school district has embraced me with open arms, and I just look forward to the commitment to making Bristol top notch. Thank you for the quick minute.
Thank you.
Dr. Monroe.
And I think I see someone else. I want to introduce to you our new elementary humanities supervisor. She's not on the agenda because we didn't know exactly when she was going to be able to tell her superintendent that she was leaving Hartford and coming here. She is. Oh, okay. Guess I want to only read the agenda on Friday night. So, Azra Redzik, if you'd stand, comes to us, formerly the principal, or sort of still for a couple of weeks.
January 2nd, when I start here.
I got to see her talent this summer when she came in and did a workshop on social emotional learning for a lot of our teachers and administrators, and I immediately said, Dr. Carbone, how can we get her? And I just so look forward to you joining our team.
I am very excited to be here this evening, and I look forward to working with the Bristol family, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and a couple other little housekeeping things. The fall newsletter is in this week's Observer, so you should see that. Our FRCs are going to be hosting their holiday, well, we call it regifting, their holiday fairs where our students get to choose a gift for a family member at no cost. If you have any items that you want to donate, there's a short window. I need them by Friday so that they can be distributed to Southside, West Bristol, and Green Hills FRCs for that program. It's an awesome program. And I know that West Bristol is the 10th and 11th. I don't know the dates for Green Hills, but if you're free and you want to pop in and wrap some gifts, it's a lot of fun. Okay, all those. I have check marks. Karen River let me know what had been covered so far. So as I do every month, I'm going to update you on our priorities. Inspiring and cultivating talent. So in the work, some of these things are happening just this month, but most of them are happening throughout the year, and I'm just highlighting something that I may not have highlighted in another month. So the PDEC committee, Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, is required by the State Department of Education for us to have. And let's see, is Mrs. Lewandowski here? Yeah, but she is the chair of that committee. Our administrators need to sit on these committees and volunteer to chair them. They made a lot of progress. This year we implemented a new online evaluation system through the ProTrax program. And that came out of this committee. Now, you may remember the term instructional data team. They're now called instructional improvement teams because that's really what the focus of their work is. And the school leadership teams in every school meet during staff time on Wednesdays and before and after school, and in the high schools, they have a block where department chairs can meet during the school day. The Office of Teaching and Learning is onboarding our new secondary STEM supervisor, who you approved last month, but she has a CREC event tonight that she was at, and she couldn't be here. But Mrs. Fortin has a very detailed onboarding plan for every new supervisor in her office. Very impressive. Something we want to do every month is to recognize our staff members and our students who do things beyond the typical, like Mr. Lewandowski's painting box. Does it have a name? He's gone. Oh, he's gone, okay. And principals, I've asked them to let me know if there's something like that, which is presented at his conference for art teachers in Connecticut, and let you see some of the background stuff that goes on here. Several school principals have an executive coach this year, and this is a very typical thing in business to give an executive a coach. Somehow in education we've seen it as a weakness that needs improvement, but that is just the opposite of what it is. It's a person who our principals can speak to honestly, deal with the issues, help them problem solve, and create better systems within their schools. And so far, and this was the work Dr. Carbone arranged with a retired administrator who she's worked with, and so far so good, yes?
Excellent so far.
Very
He's
good.
working with our new principal at Hubble Elementary School, Mr. Leo, and he's working with our new principal at Chippensale Middle School, Ms. Fitzpatrick.
Which is a perfect time to get coached. Organizational and operational effectiveness. So this week we did a lot of sitting down and meeting with administrators on their budgets. They were due and they've been handed in. We'll continue that work this week and next week, and then we will start to put together all of their requests with what we believe we need to have in the budget. And as we did last year, we'll be having budget workshops. We haven't scheduled them yet. We don't have a date from the city yet because they're going to change around a little bit what they do with presentations on the budget. So we may actually go earlier than we've gone in the past because the small departments won't be presenting anymore because their budgets are so small that meeting on them can happen one-on-one, similar to what we do. Our district crisis management team, as JR said, we meet every other week and we play out some scenarios. We try to get ourselves centered. We make sure that everybody knows what somebody else's job is in case somebody isn't there when we have a crisis. And as would be, there's usually somebody who's not able to come to the meeting, and so we talk about how those roles can be covered by somebody else. And very exciting, Dr. Carbone connected with a team of Harvard doctoral students who she provided with a problem of practice having to do with our Bristol Preparatory Academy. And they worked on it, they did research, they came up with some ideas for improving it in terms of lines of responsibility as well as the work that they do. And we're hoping to continue that conversation with Larry Cavino and the teachers at Bristol Prep to improve the program and actually expand opportunities for more students than are currently covered under the 60 or fewer students in that program right now. Community engagement, as you heard, we've had 2 sessions of our equity, inclusiveness, and excellence planning. The January 3rd event will have table leaders. So if someone went to both sessions, and we did have very interesting phenomena where the second session had twice as many people as the first one. So we're going to make sure we have someone who went to 2 sessions with someone who went to 1 session so everybody feels comfortable. We're really more like cheerleaders and directors of the work and refocusing folks. It's not going to be a high-stress event for those of us who are table captains. And we welcome any members of the community who want to attend, but you need to RSVP so I can buy enough pizza. Yeah, yes.
Is it something that people can come to late, or do you have to be there at 5:30?
Well, if they got there at 10 to 6, they could still participate because people will be eating pizza as soon as they arrive.
Okay.
So I would like people to really experience the whole thing if possible, because as those of you who've been there, it's pretty amazing. Things that you learn about yourself that I had no idea was going to happen for me sitting through that session. So if you can be there, we'd love to have you, as well as maybe other members of the community that you know, because our global hope with this is that every one of us who participates uses the skills that we've developed in all of the things that we do, not necessarily in our job, with people that we talk and interact to, and to give us a different kind of lens to look at the work that we do. And so everyone will benefit. And there's another shout out for the FRCs and the holiday gifting program. Learner focused. We have our first and second year teachers. The state started up the team program again, and this is a mentoring program, and our new teachers have to complete a series of activities, submit them, and they have to successfully complete them, or they need to have a do-over, as we would do for any child in our classrooms as well. We have our district and school climate committees that are meeting at least once a month. Some are meeting more often. JR talked about some of the work that those crisis teams are doing, but sometimes it's the same team depending on the size of the school. Because when you have a school as small as Mountain View and Edgewood, they just have so many teachers who can do the work on committees, so they tend to blend their work. We're addressing a lot of social emotional learning in efforts to help our students to self-regulate better than they do, and also to have our teachers have a better understanding of the effect of trauma on anyone's life, their own or the children in front of them. Because understanding that really adds a level of compassion that is critical for these children to be successful and to make teachers better teachers. Our instructional improvement committee, which is formerly known as the district data team, we actually met this morning. It is chaired by Mrs. Fortin quite successfully. We looked at some data in different small groups and set a plan for the rest of the year as to the work that we would be completing. And that is my update.
Thank you very much. It's been a busy month for the central office, for sure. Our next agenda item is number 8, which is our consent agenda. Does anybody wish to hold anything out of items 8.1 through 8.1D? If not, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Motion for approval.
Okay, Kristen approved. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Tina. Are there any questions or okay, we can't do that. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We now move to public comment. If anybody from the public would like to speak, we'd ask you to come to the speakers table. If you would address the board chair with your comments, we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to speak at public comment? Does anybody wish to speak at public comment? Public comment is closed. We will now move to our deliberated items, item 10. And the first item is a 10.1, a completion of a roof project. Commissioner Hintz must be happy. Who is handling this one?
I think, it's Dr. Murray.
Yeah, I can help
Okay.
it.
Mrs. Dibbert's roof.
Right, it was her roof.
Oh, it was her roof.
She's going to have the Stafford roof.
Okay, all right.
This is a resolution which will require a roll call vote. Resolved that the Bristol Board of Education accepts the Hubble School roof project located at 90 West Washington Street in Bristol, Connecticut as complete, and to file the final paperwork with the Connecticut Department of Administrative Services, Office of School Construction, Grants, and Review.
I recommend the resolution, sorry.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Are you going to call it? Okay.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Yes.
Commissioner Borowski?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart?
Yes.
Commissioner Hens?
Yes.
Commissioner Caggiano?
Yes.
Commissioner Duty?
Yes.
Commissioner Giannatoni?
Yes.
Chairman Wilson?
Yes. This may seem like somewhat of a formality, but anybody that comes into our schools in our district will often comment how well our schools are taken care of, and this is symbolic of that. Yes, it's another roof project that we've worked on, but it just shows the commitment that Bristol has to public education that we keep our schools so well. Next item is a French trip to Martinique and Guadeloupe. And who is presenting that?
We have Kelly Lynn Thibodeau and Anya Rochester.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Anya Rochester. I'm a French teacher at Bristol Central. And with me is Kelly Lynn Thibodeau. She is the French teacher at Bristol Eastern. Did I say that right? Bristol Central, Bristol Eastern. So we are thinking, we're looking at something new, possibility of a trip to the French Caribbean in 2020. February 2020, and we're looking for your permission to take up to 30 students, thinking maybe 25, to Guadeloupe and Martinique.
Anybody have any questions? Just so we're clear, they're going to be missing a few days of school, but I think if we look at personalized learning nowadays, we realize that learning occurs outside the classroom as well as inside the classroom.
Well, they're missing school, so that the kids in Martinique will be in school, right?
Correct.
We hope
that is part of the plan. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're looking for. It's not like what I do, which is the exchange program, but we're looking for interaction with students to a different view of what schools are like
The
in the
French is spoken
French-speaking
in
world.
more countries than France.
Exactly. And last year was Canada. Whew. I'm a tropical girl. It doesn't work.
Does anybody else have any questions? They're probably looking for a chaperone, so just come up with the money and you're good.
I will move to approve the trip to Martinique and Guadeloupe.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion is made by Karen Hintz and seconded by Jen Doobie. Is there any further comment or questions? If not, I believe you're ready to vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Morocco next.
And as I always say, I appreciate so much the work you do on behalf of our students to take the risk to be the chaperones and the sponsors. It's a big responsibility, as you know. You've heard me speak about this before, but we appreciate you doing it on behalf of our students.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mrs. Fortin is at the speaker's table and she wants to share with us some information about smarter balance and growth.
Yes, I'm actually going to, if it's okay with the commissioners, I'd like to go a little bit out of order and do 10, I think 10.3 and 10.4 are mine. So if we could talk about 10.4, which is our vision of the graduate first, I think it would make more sense.
Certainly. We're very flexible, despite what people think.
Right. So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to our Bristol Public Schools Vision of the Graduate. It has just been implemented this year, district-wide. And so I'd like to begin with one of my absolute favorite pictures, and it does come from my days as the principal of Bristol Eastern High School. This is one of our students on the day of his graduation, and what you could see there are this student, or all of the students, they're really flanked by high school teachers, giving them that high five, really that final indication of support. And why I love this picture so much is because when I look at that, I envision all of the teachers that this particular student had from his kindergarten days up to this point. Really, you can see that that line sort of fades off into the distance, but when I'm looking at that picture, I know that that student is there because there were so many teachers and educators and administrators standing behind each of our students. That really is the why of the work that we do here in Bristol Public Schools. Simon Sinek talks about what makes strong organizations. He looks at it from a business perspective, but he also applies his learning and research towards social organizations. And one of his quotes, we say what we do, sometimes we say how we do it, but we rarely say why we do what we do. And it is focusing on that why that is the driving motivation for all of us and what we're willing to contribute to our organization as a whole. So Bristol Public Schools has a mission statement that really focuses us on how we do the work that we do, teach and learn with passion and purpose, with the undergird of those core values. And we often talk with our emphasis on story these past 2 years on the personal, individualized why of why we're here. And this is a quote from Mike Reynolds, our Teacher of the Year this year. Within his convocation speech, he said, "Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I love it. I am doing this because I want to make a difference. I am doing this because I want to be the difference between somebody having a good day or a bad day." And what we didn't have up to this point was our collective why. Why are we working together as an organization? What is it that we want for our students? And so with the work of several administrators and educators, parents across the district last year, we were able to articulate our vision of the graduate as our why. So you can see that up here now. All Bristol Public School students will graduate with the essential academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions that empower them to be self-sufficient and make meaningful contributions in a rapidly changing global society. And within that work, we've identified 4 core skill areas. The first being meaningfully contribute to a global society. This document has formed a foundation for our conversation, our community conversation, and this in particular, this expectation in particular has really informed some of those conversations, so we're proud of that. I thought it would be fun to see, well, if I looked on Twitter, all the Bristol public teachers and administrators who are posting on Twitter about what is happening in our schools right now, most recent as possible, can we see what these core skills in action as they are right now? So remembering meaningfully contribute in a global society, knowing how to interact with one another. You can see this kindergarten class, they're learning how to greet each other. On this wall right here, they have different ways where they could say hi, wave a hello, do a handshake, give a hug, do an elbow as their entry into the classroom. So right from our kindergarten, they're learning some of those social skills. And we also have, even younger than that, our pre-K students who are interacting just recently with some of our senior citizens in town. So the second core area of skills is effectively communicate in a global society. And you might have noticed, and I went quickly through it, but you might have noticed that there are subcategories of skills that are there as well. So for under effective communicate in a global society, we have a strong understanding of media literacy, communications and technology literacy, information literacy, and communication, critical skills for engaging in that rapidly changing society. And so a recent demonstration of that, I think this is actually just from today, maybe Dr. Huber can share that. We had some students that were interacting with Woods Hole Oceanic Institute to learn about what their work that they're doing there, using their technology that's available at the school. We also have successfully employ skills for self-sufficiency, where being goal-directed and having an understanding of financial literacy, health literacy, and civic literacy are an important outcome that we want for our students graduating from Bristol Public Schools. And of course, our students, this is from Bristol Central, our high schools participated in a mock election just recently, engaging in that civic literacy. And finally, demonstrate academic knowledge and skills. And you might have noticed that content mastery here is the shortest list. And that's really because our curriculum that we have across our pre-K-12 really defines what we want in terms of an outcome from content mastery through the curriculum writing process and the curriculum that we approve. You've helped us identify what is the content that our students need to master by the time that they graduate. But we also wanted to recognize that there's critical thinking and problem solving that stands out above that as well. And so again, we see this is a 5th grade class planning their Thanksgiving dinner, applying some math to how they would plan for a big group at Thanksgiving. And we have some problem solving that was happening at Bristol Eastern High School with this BE Rain Garden. So the vision of the graduate in totality, it looks like a pretty daunting document, but that's because we have a big job ahead of us. And we're all working together from a pre-K perspective all the way up to our teachers of seniors, really helping to enact that vision. And I'll take any questions that you might have about that.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. You talked at the beginning about this picture and this young man. I just wanted to share with everybody how at Eastern's graduation last year, well, earlier this year, Mrs. Fortin came, and Dr. Moreau and I were sitting in the front row, and we said, come sit with us. And she said, no, I'm sitting in the back. And we didn't know why she didn't want to sit with us, and then we realized, as soon as the students were called up, she was up with the teachers because she wanted to be one of those.
Given the high five, right. Thank you. Anything else on that? All right, so now we're going to go to the next agenda item, which is on smarter balance. So if I can just have a minute to transition here. Just quickly saw that in reverse. So this presentation was really delivered to our Student Achievement Committee in October. This is a more condensed version of that. And it's actually highlighting some of the data that you'll be seeing when you come to our next Student Achievement Committee on December 19th, where our schools will be presenting their data showcase. This Smarter Balance Assessment Achievement Report is based on our students' performance across the district last spring. And while I'm calling it an achievement report, what I would like to do is really distinguish between the two ways that the state of Connecticut is now looking at student achievement and student performance in our schools. When we had the CMT, you might have been familiar with just achievement levels and bands of students. And we were really only looking at the percent of students who met or exceeded our expectation. That's still an important factor for the state. We do want to know how many of our students are meeting that level of expectation for each of our courses that is being assessed on the SBA, but it isn't the only factor, which is something that I'm pretty happy about. So in the old days, when you talked about SAT, we used to have a term called the golden band. When we wanted to increase the percent of students who were at meet or exceeding, a lot of attention was given to this group, knowing that there was potential to move that golden band group forward. And that narrow focus really directed a lot of energy and effort and resources to one particular group of students. In the new model, you saw that red line across there, we don't just look at that one particular group any longer. Right now, under the state model, all means all, and we're really looking for all students growing. And the state's model does this in two ways. The first is when they're looking at achievement, they're no longer looking at the percent of students at a particular level. They're really looking for a higher mean score, higher average. And in order, as you know, to get a higher average, that means everybody needs to rise. So in this way, when they're looking at achievement, we're looking at a higher average vertical scale score. And there's a technical formula here. You don't need to know that. You just need to know that we're looking at all students' performance and no longer just focusing our energy and effort and resources towards one particular band. The second is a growth metric, which we're now looking at, and the state is recognizing. And this is what I value most, because as a parent and as an educator, we all want our students to grow no matter where they come in. If a child comes in and they're already achieving expectations, that doesn't mean that that's okay. We still want them to grow beyond that. And if a student is struggling, we're looking for them to grow as well. It's a universal practice about being an educator. We're not just looking solely at that achievement indicator. So under this model, each student has a unique starting point based on their SBA performance from the prior year. Each has a specific goal for improvement. So those points of growth is determined by that unique starting point. And so let me show you a model of that. So let's say we have Johnny here. Depending on how he did in his third grade SBA, he might have 100 points of growth to meet his target. And then we have Jane, who, given her starting point, may have to meet 60 points of growth to earn her target. And the way that the state is accounting for this now is they're giving us how much the percent target achieved, how many points they achieved of that 100 points. So in this case, I think I named him Johnny. Johnny earned 65 of the 100 points, so he has 65% of the target achieved. And we'll see that Jane has 85% of the target achieved. And in this way, we could say as a district, looking at our growth percent target achieved, how far our students are growing. When we're looking at that average of these students together, are our students making the growth that we would want them to. They also give us a growth rate. And the growth rate is really a yes or no. How many of our students overall did meet their target? So I wanted to share that particular data tonight because I think it's pretty exciting for us as a district. You'll see here that we're looking at our contiguous towns for the most part. And our box here is in that shaded blue. And you'll see this first number is our growth rate. And our average percent target achieved is what is in the second column. You'll see that right now, 62% of our students are falling within the high need category. You're in the high need category if you are a student who requires special education. You are a student who is free and reduced lunch, or a student who requires EL services, English language services. So right now you see that we have a majority of our students, 62% of our students falling into that category. All of these gray boxes are where Bristol's growth rate and percent target achieved is higher than these contiguous towns, indicating that we've had higher growth in ELA. So for example, ELA with Plymouth, ELA high needs, so our high needs population have higher growth than what they have in Plymouth. And you could look across here to see all of those gray boxes are where we're seeing a higher growth rate in Bristol than we are in comparison to these contiguous towns. I'll give you a moment to take a look at those numbers.
We should celebrate that.
Absolutely.
We should celebrate that. We don't get a chance to celebrate too much, but we should celebrate that.
Absolutely. Like I said, I do think it's the hope of every parent that no matter where you're coming into our Bristol schools, that you know that as a result of the work of our educators that you're going to see an impact on your own individual child, and that's what we're seeing when we're seeing a higher growth rate. So kudos to all the work that has gone into that this past year.
You know, those of us who've been on the board for a while, we've seen so many different programs to evaluate our students. Is there any hope that the state will keep this framework for a while so that we have some legacy data to benchmark ourselves moving forward?
I would like to say yes. I think some of this is dependent upon what our federal government also is looking for in terms of achievement. But
Every Student Succeeds Act is why Connecticut had to create this growth model.
Okay. So there is some hope that we will be looking at the same data year over year in the same sort of construct.
Yeah. And I do think it's an equitable way of looking at our student performance too. When you're looking at some districts where students might have more advantages than those that might be coming into some other towns, it's another way of looking at a more equitable way of what we're achieving as a school district. Sometimes when I am sharing this data, people will say, okay, well maybe if students aren't at a higher achievement rate, then maybe they have more room to grow, which is maybe why Bristol has a higher growth rate. But I would just like to point out that Farmington has a very high achievement level, and you also see that they have a higher growth rate. So those two don't necessarily factor into each other because of the target score. If you think back to that slide, that target score that students need to achieve is calculated based on each level of achievement. So that's really reflective of the work that we've done as a district.
I don't want to dominate questions, but do you have the ability to give us the high need rate for those towns you have up there?
I do. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can provide that at another point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Ford? Mrs. Ford?
Mrs. Ford.
Pretty soon you'll get there. This is pretty exciting information, and we're really pleased that you brought it forward.
Great.
Glad the Student Achievement Committee saw fit to bring this forward, and
As I said, if you want to have the opportunity to interact with each of our schools about what their data is reflecting from the previous year and where they are now, we would welcome you at our Student Achievement Committee meeting that will be held here in this room because we need a little bit more space to have all of our schools present on December 19th at 6:30. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next item on our agenda is our schedule of our board meetings, and the schedule you have in front of you is very similar than what we've been doing from year to year. But if we've been tossing around another proposed schedule that's not on here. So if you look at that schedule and then you think instead of having our July meeting July 4th week, we move that meeting to the 10th, I believe it is. I don't have it open, so I'm going from memory. So I believe is it the 10th? So it's the 12th? Is it the 12th then?
That would be Thursday. No, I mean, Friday.
What day is the?
The 3rd, that would be the 10th.
It would be the 10th. Okay, so if we had that meeting in July on the 10th, we would avoid July 4th weekend, and then we could have each of our meetings on the 1st of the month in a regular schedule. It would be August 1st and September for the first Wednesday of August and September. We'd stay on a consistent schedule. So that is an alternative schedule if you don't like this schedule. So
Would the first Wednesday of September work for district staff, since that's generally the chaos of school opening?
that was the feedback I received.
I mean, the buildings, I mean, it's more central office working on the agenda. I don't foresee us having a problem. And the open houses would be the next week, so it's actually better, because we do have a conflict with open houses, usually for the September board meeting.
So does everybody understand what the alternative would be? Is that we would move the July meeting from the 3rd to the 10th, and then the August and September meetings would be the first Wednesday of the month, like all of our meetings typically are, and then so on throughout the rest of the year, they'd be the first Wednesday of the month. There's always the possibility that there isn't any agenda item in August, and then we could cancel that meeting if we don't have enough of agenda for August, since you're only 3 weeks away. You're looking at me, Susan, so do you have some thoughts on this that you'd like to share?
No.
No, okay. So does everybody understand what is being proposed?
Yes.
Does anybody have an opinion? Do you want to go with the printed schedule, or do you rather go with the alternative schedule?
I'd rather go alternative.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we go with the alternative schedule with the July 10th meeting.
Yep.
And the first Wednesday of every month thereafter.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay.
August 7th
And September 4th.
September 4th.
Okay, thank you. So the motion on the floor is that we will change the Board of Education schedule to be meet on July 10th and then the first Wednesday of each month thereafter.
And I know we have January 8th of 2020, I'm assuming New Year's is on the way.
It's January 1st, isn't it?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
It's gonna, for the 2020 meeting, it will be a January 8th, it won't be the first, it won't be the first.
No, because New Year's is.
Okay, all right, it's New Year's, okay,
But
yes.
that's marked, that's also marked on the calendar.
Okay, so does anybody need any more information to vote? You all ready to vote? Motion's on the floor, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Okay. Is there any new business? I don't believe we have any new business. Any information? Does anybody have any information they wish to share? Ms. Fibber?
Just something briefly. I spend a lot of time in the car for my job driving around the state, and I was listening to a report on, from Goodwin College, the future of manufacturing education, Goodwin's mobile manufacturing lab. And apparently it's a 44-foot trailer, and the website has some great pictures. They do go to manufacturing facilities and do workshops, but they also go to schools, both middle schools and high schools. I know many people have been approached, and we see those on social media can see this a lot. We have a number of small and medium-sized manufacturing firms here in Bristol, and the owners and the managers are always complaining that they're not getting the quality of the student, the quality of the people to work there. So I printed this out, I wanted to bring this to give to the superintendent. It sounds like a wonderful opportunity to have them come and have Bristol students be able to go through this mobile manufacturing lab. It has hands-on ability for the students. It teaches them, what goes on. They used 4 D words: dirty, dank, I can't remember the others. And it's not, yes, dark. It's not what manufacturing is any longer. Manufacturing is very, very different. I've been in one of the local manufacturing facilities here in Bristol. They're bright, they're clean. Not only that, we're not talking about grease monkeys, so to speak. The people who are working in these manufacturing facilities are very highly trained and very specialized and can make a great career and earn a very good living. So
We have a Bristol Technical Advisory Committee, the Chamber and the manufacturers and the educators work together, so this, I'm sure Dr. Moreau could share that with council.
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, I will now start with liaison reports and start with Commissioner Lewandowski. Commissioner Giantonio.
I just wanted to present a reminder about some training that's being sponsored by our Greater Bristol Special Education PTO. The training is actually being conducted by the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. It'll take place Tuesday, December 11th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at Chapter 126 here on Upson Street in Bristol. The name of the training is called The Nuts and Bolts of Special Education, and it's for parents of children with disabilities who will learn how to become more active participants in their children's education. This session will include information on evaluations, record keeping, planning and placement team meetings, individualized education programs, Section 504, and dispute resolution. They will have childcare and pizza and refreshments for those that attend. Registration is required. I hope that anybody who'd be interested to share their information at the schools or their meetings. I know I shared it with Dr. Dieter, and I'm grateful to see that you've spread the news. Thank you.
Commissioner Dewey.
During the month of November, West Bristol School held its annual Turkey Derby. Students and staff participated in a fun-filled event to show their school spirit. They kicked off the annual West Bristol Community Outreach Project for the month of December, where they are looking for food donations to give back to the local communities. The Grinch for Good Grinchmas Gala, that's a tongue twister, which will be held on December 20th, will be our culminating celebration of students recognizing ways that they've worked to grow their heart 3 sizes bigger by doing good deeds for others. Finally, the 8th grade community service project, I know I've discussed this in the past as well, is to collect bottles and cans to support the Wounded Warrior Project. To date, it has yielded 6,300 bottles and cans. The goal is to collect 10,000 by the end of the school year. And lastly, we are having a vendor fair this Saturday from 10 to 4 at West Bristol. I know in years past it has been a massive event where 2 gymnasiums are full of vendors, so come check it out and do some last minute Christmas shopping.
And where is the collection for the bottles and cans for the Wounded Warrior?
I believe that's right in the entryway.
In the rotunda.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Caggiano?
Nothing to report.
Commissioner River?
Yes, please. A few weeks ago, I visited Southside School, and I was able to tour the building with Dr. Huber. We visited several classrooms. The teachers, the students, they're always very welcoming. We spoke, and Commissioner Hintz spoke about Mark Brackett and social-emotional learning, and a lot of that is being embraced at Southside. For instance, many of the classrooms that we went in, we were in the morning, and they were having their morning welcome, and they were talking about books that they were reading, and there would be a question from the teacher, and the students would get into groups on their own, even the 1st and 2nd grade students. They were very welcoming of each other. If there was one extra student as opposed to having a duo, they welcomed somebody over. They told me that they always mixed it up and had different students, different groups. One of the classrooms, I saw the sign, Mrs. Fortin had talked about it in her presentation, and as opposed to a student greeting, it was the teacher greeting, and the students got to pick. They would point to the picture, whether they wanted the hug or the high five or the handshake. They're starting off their day on an emotional high. I did visit a sensory room, and that was very interesting to me. I had never seen anything like that before, where we have some students who just need to get rid of that energy. They may have an IUP, and that's one of the situations they have. And another special services classroom with a teacher and some para-educators working on reading. We're saving a lot of money by doing a lot of these things in-house, and I could see the students and the para-educators and the teachers were working really well together. They had a lot of respect for each other. I did get to visit the art room and saw it on Mr. Lewandowski's Jackson Pollock idea. I do want to say that every time I visit Southside, I see evidence of collaboration amongst the teachers. They're always getting together, they're sharing their ideas, and working together. He does have a really good idea. I'm not going to get into details because it's budget effective, but it affects the budget, but I'll let you talk to her later, Dr. Huber. I did visit one other school with Commissioner O'Brien, but I'm going to pass and let him talk about that when it gets down to that end of the table.
Might be his first time visiting a school in 5 years, but we're glad to see he got out. Commissioner Taylor.
No report.
Commissioner Ince.
I yield my time to Commissioner O'Brien.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Even though Commissioner Hibbert forgot about it, I reminded her that there was a Thanksgiving dinner at Central, which is held for all veterans. And we were escorted in and thanked for our service. I assume they understood it was board service, not veteran service. It was really wonderful the way the students approached it, and of course Pete and Ryan and others were wandering around in chef's outfits, but the meal was as good as you would expect for cafeteria food.
A kind way of saying it.
But I think it was well appreciated by our veterans, and they really enjoyed it, and the kids did a wonderful job of leading them down to the cafeteria and providing them with service and taking good care of them, and it just was a very uplifting event. And we also got to visit Bob DeSantis, which is a highlight of any trip to Central, who promised once again that he's leaving this year. So it was successful all around.
You know, those Veterans Affairs groups that we have across the community are very impactful, and it's a step to our community engagement. I was able to go up and sort of be a guest up at Southside, and I appreciate David for inviting me. And so I think I know other schools do it, but we need to publicize it a little bit more so we get a little public reaction out of it. City Councilman, I didn't forget you. City Councilman Kelly.
Thank you. No report.
Okay. I did just want to say one last thing. There is a CABE Legal Issues session on Friday. If you're able to attend, I'm going to be out of town, but they'll be talking about the Janus versus ASME case, special education and labor law, education law issues, and it'll be at the Sheridan Hartford South in Rocky Hill. There's also going to be a legislative breakfast on January 24th at the Capitol for all the people that are in Area 2 for CABE, and we're in Area 2. And then I am tentatively trying to plan a legislative breakfast for our legislative contingent with Senator Martin and Representative Pavlak D'Amato and Representative Ziogas and Representative Betts. We're thinking about June 5th at 9 a.m. January 5th, I'll get it eventually. January 5th at 9 a.m. We're trying to work with CABE and our legislative delegate and our administrative team if we can get enough representatives. We wanted to get to them with the session, so we will have CABE come and present their legislative agenda, which is basically our legislative agenda, and we will have some interaction and dialogue with our legislative delegation. So assuming everybody can come, but that I just want you to put it on your calendars and hold it out for January 5th at 9 a.m. Be like an hour and a half. It won't be a long time, but we would like to touch base with them and just sort of set up, relationships and contacts with our legislators so that we help in the legislative process, so that we're involved and engaged with any legislation that might come down regarding education. Unless anybody else has anything else, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. We are adjourned.
Aye.